is Roger Weisberg. He's got a film at the festival called No Tomorrow. It's a documentary, and it's a very interesting story. It's actually a follow-up to another documentary that you made earlier in your career. Do you want to tell us about No Tomorrow?
Sure. No Tomorrow is essentially about the death penalty, and the film centers around the murder of the subject of a recent film called Aging Out. We made this film about 4 years ago, in which we followed young people who age out of the foster care system and have to fend for themselves. And just less than a year after our film was completed, one of the key subjects that we followed in Aging Out was murdered. And we were asked to provide the tape to the homicide investigator and then to the district attorney. And it turns out that they intended to use our film in this death penalty trial in order to foster sympathy for the victim and hatred for the defendant. We were very ambivalent, actually, because we had moral reservations about the death penalty, and yet we wanted Risa's murderer to be punished in the most severe way possible. So we decided, even though this is a film we never wanted to make or thought we would ever make, that we were really compelled to make this film because of our relationship with the murder victim. So the new film, No Tomorrow, really examines this trial and the broader questions surrounding the controversy around the death penalty.
And now this film has taken on a life of its own because you're using it as a jumping off point to start a conversation about the death penalty.
Absolutely. The film, in addition to reaching the general public through television broadcasts and home video and educational distribution, is also reaching major stakeholders in the death penalty debate. We're in the midst of a community engagement campaign and have reached out to thousands of organizations, including law schools and state legislators and victim rights families and other criminal justice professionals, district attorneys associations, public defenders association, human rights groups, advocacy groups, and so on. And to date, we've scheduled about 140 screenings and forums and panel discussions around the film. We feel that the film gives ammunition to these groups to delve into these issues. And we've really concentrated on those states where there is legislation pending to either reform or abolish the death penalty.
And you yourself have feelings about the death penalty, right? What side of it are you on?
Well, what's interesting is I came to this film with a strong predisposition against the death penalty. I thought it was morally wrong, but I didn't understand all the subtleties and nuances of the debate until I really dove into it. And once I got into the midst of it, I could see how people, especially family and loved ones, could feel that the death penalty is really a legitimate human response to the most heinous crimes, and this was a heinous murder. And yet, the more I learned about how the death penalty is administered, how inaccurate it is, how arbitrary it is depending on where you happen to live, how discriminatory it is based on your resources and your race and your ethnicity, and then how phenomenally more costly it is to maintain a death penalty versus life without parole, I became convinced that even if people felt it was legitimate human response, it just wasn't a legitimate public policy to maintain.
And No Tomorrow, your documentary, delves into all of this, doesn't it? It looks at all of these issues.
It does. I mean, the spine of the film is really this death penalty trial, and you see it unfolding, and viewers are really put in the position of the jurors being buffeted back and forth by all the arguments about the death penalty. But the film also delves into the broader philosophic and legal issues around the death penalty. And of course, in the middle of all of that is this film within a film, because we see how Aging Out was used unexpectedly by us as a central component of this trial.
So the the prosecution asked for your documentary, Aging Out, about this young woman, and then they showed that to the jurors. So what? And you were in the courtroom the whole time filming this for No Tomorrow? Is that you had access to?
No, we didn't. We were only provided access to certain moments in the trial, but we were able to talk to all of the major participants and interview them separately. The defense attorney, the prosecutor, their key witnesses on both sides, and most importantly, the jurors. So what we weren't in the courtroom to show, we were able to explain in greater depth because we did these interviews with all of the trial's participants. And interestingly, I thought I'd point out that a big surprise to us was to learn that Judge Lance Ito was presiding over this case, of course, the judge who became known for the O.J. Simpson trial.
What was that like? You had probably seen him on TV from the O.J. Simpson trial, and now here you are working on your documentary, and he's the presiding judge. Did you go in there with some idea of what he would be like, and what in the end?
Not really. It turned out that he and his wife were very involved in programs to support youth in foster care and at-risk youth in Los Angeles. And he had seen Aging Out during the trial and had probably seen it before the trial because he had to rule on a petition from the defense to keep that out of the trial. So he was moved by the film Aging Out and was really supportive of what we were doing. In fact, after the trial, you're never allowed to show any of the jurors. He wrote a letter to the jurors, not telling them to participate, but telling them that the filmmakers who made Aging Out would like to talk to them, and if they wanted to, they should contact us, and most of them did, which was really because of Judge Ito's intervention. So he was very supportive of what we were trying to do.
So how many of the jurors were you able to put in your film?
Ultimately, because of scheduling and so forth, 7 of the 12 jurors participated.
Okay. And what else do we learn in the course of the film? I know in the end the defendant is convicted.
Yeah, this particular defendant, Juan Chavez, killed 3 people, was convicted of murdering 3 people. He killed 2 in a gang-related rampage. And then Risa, the subject of our earlier film, was a potential witness. She wasn't there when those murders were committed, but she had taken him to the warehouse where he had committed those murders the night before. So basically, Risa was the only one that could tie Chavez to these murders. And so Chavez knew if the police could get to Risa, and they were looking for her before he could, that he was a goner, that Risa could identify him as the murderer. So he brutally, execution-style, murdered Risa Bejarano. And we see in the course of the film the way our film about Risa was used to inflame the emotions of the jurors. It turns out that the jury returned verdicts of life without parole for the first 2 murders in the warehouse, but they sentenced this defendant to death for the murder of Risa Bejarano. And sadly, the prosecutor and the defense attorney and the jurors, many of them led us to believe that our film Aging Out might have played a pretty strong role. And that's what really motivated us to make the film, that we had unwittingly contributed to the prosecutor's success in convincing the jury to impose the death penalty. And so in the end, I think the film will buffet viewers back and forth between the various positions pro and against the death penalty. But I think the thing that's unique about the film is, with such an unsympathetic defendant and such a sympathetic victim, you could still come away from this experience not and oppose strongly the death penalty, and that was really our underlying intent.
Okay. And this all took place last year?
Yeah, the trial took place in 2009. That's right.
Okay. And where is Chavez now? Is he on death row in California?
He's on death row in San Quentin Prison in California, where he'll probably remain for the rest of their lives. In California, they've executed 13 people in 30 years, and they've got close to 800 people sitting on death row awaiting execution. The chances are likely that these men will die of other causes long before the state ever gets around to executing them.